I met Dr. Anael Alston about 15 years ago at a junior high school reunion that I threw. He attended the same junior high school as me just a couple of years prior. We spoke and immediately realized we were connected by an entire tribe of people. Smart individual, a guy that I call on for anything that I need, and vice versa. Whatever he needs, he knows he can call on me. We've spoken at events together. He plugged me in with my brother's keeper, gave me my first opportunity to speak in front of large audiences about my work. He is currently the assistant commissioner of the New York State Department of Education, but he's so much more than that because at his root, he's an educator. And so I wanted to have a conversation about how the state of education is adjusted through this COVID-19 pandemic, and I felt he was the right guy to have this conversation with. So I present to you Dr. Anael Alston. Enjoy. Peace and love, everybody. My name is Marlon Rice. I am the lead journalist for Our Time Press. And I've been doing interviews. I've been checking the pulse of our community to figure out how business owners and educators and creators are adjusting in the wake of this pandemic, doing the things that they need to do, all of us, and not just the industries that I mentioned, but every one of us is out here trying to continue our work to try to continue some semblance of normalcy at a time like this. And so, before I begin, I just want to wish my best and send out condolences to everyone who's lost someone, and send out a prayer of safety to everyone that's still sheltering in place as we get through this quarantine and we get through this pandemic, like I know we will. This gentleman that I'm interviewing today is a guy who I've known his family for a very long time. I've known him for a long time. We got together at a Satellite East Junior High School reunion that I had put together. And then I realized that his little brother and me had been friends for a long time. And we've just created this cool bond where, like, we kind of, in different ways, with our different styles, we've kind of always been supportive of one another. Um, and that's kind of like one of the dopest kind of relationships to have with somebody, is when that person can kind of, feed off you, and you can kind of feed off him. And that's been a relationship with me and Dr. Alston. I'm going to let him introduce himself because he'll do a lot better than me. I just want to tell you guys, all of my work, all of the speeches and the writing that you've seen from my work with my brother's keeper would be naught if not for him. He's the entire reason that I'm connected in any way, shape, or form to my brother's keeper, which I'm humbly grateful for. So, Dr. Anael Lawson, you can take a moment and tell him about yourself.
Sure. So I'm from Bedford-Stuyvesant, and even before I get in, I think it was important that you acknowledged it, and to all of the people who have lost people, and I have friends who have lost people,
Yeah.
and I have friends who have been stricken by the virus and
Yeah.
who have made it through, and that is powerful in that how they were able to get through and navigating, and it's not easy, and everyone who has experienced it says it's something they'll never forget and something they don't wish on anyone,
Right.
because it's that kind of journey. So, and I think it's important to just recognize and acknowledge people who have lost people, who have gone through this, and that this is a new situation that many of us have not seen before. So back to kind of what I'm up to is I'm from Bedford-Stuyvesant. I'm still connected to Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I'm an educator. And I've been an educator for 20, maybe 25 years. And um, what I do now, the position I'm currently in, although I was a teacher and an assistant principal, superintendent, I'm currently sitting as Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Access, Equity, and Family and Community Engagement at the New York State Education Department. And I am not representing that in this conversation, it's as an educator. So part of my job is I oversee all of the access and opportunity programs across New York State, which comes to about close to $200 million in programming to give the kinds of resources, skills, and access that kids in my neighborhood didn't have when we were growing up, or certainly not that level of access. And it's statewide. So I get a very broad perspective of what's going on across the state. And I'm honored to serve in this capacity because, you know, I get to do something that matters to a group of people who may not know all of the options. And quite frankly, if not for being underserved and marginalized and structural and institutional racism and all the other isms, might not have the kind of access to live the kind of life that is touted as the American dream. So my comments today are my own, but we will get deep into some things.
That's great, man. First, how's the family? Everybody's good?
Everyone is good, thank God. I did not call my mother yet. She's on my docket. I call her just about every day, and we talk about a variety of things, make recommendations for Netflix, make sure she's doing her stay-at-home exercises, and she's fine.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting dynamic is, as a teenager, I didn't listen all the time, and as an adult, she doesn't listen to me all the time.
Right.
So it's interesting, that relationship, but that's good. My daughter's good. My wife is good. I'm a small family, and everyone's holding together. So far, so good. So thank you for asking.
At what point in your work did you realize that this COVID-19 pandemic would put an immediate halt on the normal way that our system educates our young? And kind of take us through those first few days and like your reactions, but more so your planning, knowing that we would all have to go inside. What was some of your kind of thought processes about this, both as a parent and as an educator?
Sure. So I think it's important. Although I'm from a family of 9, I'm a kind of a loner. So I do a lot of thinking, right? And I've always been someone who would just look at a situation and just think way out, just because it's something I picked up. And I also travel a lot. And so when it broke out in China, I was like, well, how long before it gets here? Because there's no reason why it would just stay in China. And then it was in Italy. And because I travel, a lot, not for work, it's only statewide, but in my personal life, I like to move around.
Right.
And I said, at some point it's going to get here. And I would hear the president say, not so much, or not that concerned. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, it doesn't add up. Mm-hmm. And so on March the 10th, part of what in my professional work, we were going around having these graduation requirement meetings across the state with the different board of regents. Mm-hmm. So we were at York, and someone asked me to go. One of the deputy commissioners said, hey, could you go down to New York City at York College, and Regent Chin and Regent Young were doing this? And I said, sure, absolutely. And that day, other things started getting canceled. Mm-hmm. Other events across the state of not state ed, but other gatherings. And so I said, okay, this is a thing. And then when we got the call that schools were going to close, and then the office was going to close, I said, okay, so this is what that phase means, because people were getting diagnosed with it. And I think it hit significant when I heard Assemblyman Charles Barron publicly. And I said, okay, this is a game changer. And if no one wanted to act before then, we knew that massive action was going to happen, because now you're talking about the state powers that be are as susceptible as the homeless man on the street or the homeless woman on the street. And so you knew immediate action was going to happen, and it did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Assemblyman Barron, because of who he is and what he means in our community. his announcement was like the linchpin of all of this. Like, and so his announcement came after the NBA. So the NBA, if you remember the NBA, that Jazz Nuggets game where Rudy Gobert, they found out he was positive. They canceled the game. They canceled the season. That was that Thursday. Then that Friday is when Assemblyman Barron spoke, and his admission of being positive meant more in our environment than whatever the NBA was doing, because I felt vulnerable. I'm like, if this guy has it, Assemblyman Barron, he's in our communities, he's in Albany, he works tirelessly for communities, and if he has it, absolutely I can get it. And so that totally was the stopping point of normal life. It was like, okay, now you have to be mindful and adhere to whatever policies need to be adhered to. So yeah, so
Right.
you mentioned that. So the with the school lockdown, you have kids at home working from home, being educated from home. You have parents who are working from home. In theory, the idea that kids can simply go online and learn sounds, okay, maybe. But in practice, there's been a lot of difficulties with that. You have kids that have IEPs. You have kids that are special needs. You have kids that are neither, but they live in an environment where they may not have Wi-Fi or there's only one computer, where parents can't concentrate on working with their children because they're still trying to work in their normal lives to earn a living.
Right.
As an educator, as somebody who sets policy, what are some of your thoughts on how this is going? What are some of your thoughts about how to make it better?
So, as an educator, there's a lot of opportunity here. See, it's a bad hand, no matter how you play. So, in life, we get bad hands, and so the question is, what do we do with it? My greater concern is that the gaps to access and equity are going to be further compounded by this um, by this being schooled at home, or this electronic education, right?
Right.
And but even in that, there's opportunity, right? And so yes, it is very difficult for people who have, remember, no one was prepared for this, to say, on a drop of a dime, we're going to go to online learning. But those who have always been ahead of the curve, it's seamless. And so there are schools who are doing it well because that was already a component of what they do. And then there are schools that kids don't have laptops, which speaks volumes. Like, how do you not have students in school already? So it's exposing those who have been prepared and those who have not been prepared. How do you have students who have never been on a Chromebook?
Right.
All right. And so we'll hold that right there. You mentioned special needs and IEPs, and districts are supposed to send their plans, and they have, on how students will be educated, all students be educated during this home e-learning, distant learning process. And I imagine it will vary from district to district. I have not reviewed them, but it is very difficult to provide those services online. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's certainly not impossible, but it's much more difficult than when you are in a building. But at the same time, you're familiar with Uhuru Sasha, right? That the private independent Black school.
Right.
I'm not sure they had special education classes there.
No.
So, well, exactly. Yeah, I said I'm not sure, but of course I kind of know.
Right.
And so the question is, how are we meeting the needs of people before we start putting them in categories? Right? So what you'll find is, in some cases, and we know there are some schools where a student can come in, and depending on the teachers and the principal and the leadership and the orientation of the school, we'll say, look, whatever your IEP says, we are going to exceed those goals. We are going to exceed because we believe in you, and we're going to find ways to meet your needs and engage you. And so I'm not minimizing the special education process. What I'm saying is that there are opportunities for us to meet the needs of our students in ways that we've never really considered before. The question is, do we have the courage and the mindset to say, let's just do this differently? And now, in many regards, educators' hands are forced to say, this is not a business where change is very much welcome, but change has been forced upon us. So we're concerned about the gap increasing, but as the optimist and as someone who puts a lot of thinking into this, I'm also looking for the opportunity. So it's a complex web, but it is not something that we can't overcome when we put our creative thinking hats on and just look at what does a youngster need, what does their history tell us, and how do we get them from A to B, right, from here to there.
You know what, you brought up the perfect segue to my next question, because you spoke about using your creative intuition and opportunity, right? So one of the things that I've been doing while I'm in the house working is, because we have a small business, like, so my girlfriend has BK Buddha. She's been selling elderberry syrup, and it's been an amazing hit in the community, right? But not just her alone. So like, you have April Walker, who's doing these custom face masks. You have Kenya Heiliger that does shea butter, whipped shea butter. And like, so all of these small businesses, like home-based businesses, are sprouting up because people are applying the adage, do what you can with what you have, right? And with a creative intuition, you can find opportunity, and you can work the opportunity. So even though we've all been in the house, there's been a bunch of opportunity for us to do things. One of the things I'm working on now is creating a directory of these businesses, these home-based businesses, in order to give a brighter light on what people are doing, knowing that because of our blessing, because of the fact that people have been buying elderberry, we start to think about, well, who can we support? What other home-based businesses can we support? And so when I put the word out, immediately you sent me your site, where you actually help kids write elite level college essays. And I like to say, I wish you were doing this in 91 when I was writing mine. I wish you was doing this back then. But
you didn't want to take advice from me in 91.
Yeah, right.
No kind of advice.
But speak for a minute about that that work you're doing, and and its importance, because it's important.
So the context is, I was out at a friend's house in Sag Harbor. It was really her father's house, one of my former parents, and I asked her. Her daughter is now a sophomore in college, and I said, "Well, how did you navigate the college process?" And she said, "Oh, well, I just paid so and so $150 an hour, and she took care of everything from A to Z." And this is a woman of means, great family. And I said, everyone can't do that. Now, you might be able to do it, I might be able to do it, but the reality is that's discretionary cash, and it's an investment, but everyone can't do it. And so I said, what are the skill sets that I have? And okay, so I said, look, I'm going to create a course. I know how to write essays. I've been helping youngsters get into college since I've been in K-12. And what I have found is that there are people who know how to do it well, and they charge a lot of money. And then there are people who do the best they can. And that's a gap.
Mhm.
So having gone through the process of helping my daughter apply to boarding school and then just doing a lot of research, and I said, look, I'm going to create a course. And the difference between what I do and you do, I'm not charging because that's just not what I'm doing right now. I'm creating my own way to help youngsters understand what the college essay is about, why it is part of the application, and how you structure yourself and tell your story and have the best shot at representing yourself in the room when they're making the decision. And so I created a website, the College Essay Doc, and .com, where it's a squeeze page, and it leads you to a course on a teachable platform where you literally will get my expertise, my wife's expertise, and proven ways to help youngsters get into school, or at least to write their college essay. And I just started this online school academy, College Wise Academy. And so that's my way of using this downtime. You know, I'm home a lot now, obviously, to what am I going to do? Well, we know that there's opportunity, and the opportunity for me is to help more people during a crisis. So I'm about 90% done with it, but it's something that I'm proud of because it's giving back in a way that I can't reach everyone, but I can do my part. And that's one way I pivoted. Now there are people who make these courses and sell them, and that's fine too. But I'm not prepared to do that while I have such a big job to begin with. I would rather just, some people like to play the piano. I like to create a course or teach, and so that's what I'm doing. And it's been very, 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 very good, and getting great feedback from those who take it. Yeah.
Tell them the website again so that people that are interested.
www.thecollegeessay.doc. So that's what it is.
Okay.
I have a doctorate, and it's rather than the college essay guy, it's the college essay doc. Mm-hmm. And that's one way to kind of take a hand that you dealt and make something out of it, right? Make lemonade out of lemons.
Out of lemons. That's all we're doing right now. But you can still make something delicious out of something sour.
Right.
Last question. We know the severity of this. This is not a game. People we know have been infected and have recovered. People we know have died from this. Take off the educator hat for a minute. I'm just speaking now to the forward thinker, the guy that's the forward thinker. How do you see the next 6 months playing out? Like, do you see us getting back to some semblance of normalcy in the next 6 months? And so let me just qualify this before you answer, because one of the things that I've been in these conversations, a friend of mine put out a very good point. He's a barber. What he said was how the restaurant industry has Department of Health people coming in on a regular basis to make sure that the place is good enough to eat at. In that same way, what he sees moving forward is that some governing body will have to govern the beauty industry the way that they govern the restaurant industry. Because in the beauty industry, you have a closeness. When your barber's cutting your hair, he's right there. Beautician, the same thing. And there's a lot of communicable diseases. Like now, okay, so COVID-19 has shed a light on how easy it is to communicate a disease, how easy it is to pass it on. So what he said he thought would be in the future is governing bodies actually governing his industry and actually, making sure people are certified, making sure people are negative, making sure they do things like training about communicable diseases. And that was kind of the pivot he saw in the future. So what I'm asking you is to give me some of the same. Over the next 6 months, like, what do you see as some of the ways in which we as a society can become normal again?
So I think there will be a new normal. And I also think it doesn't have to be that complicated. In fact, there are blueprints for how you move out of this stay at home. And I envision it coming out in stages, right? And so stage one might look like, well, you don't have to stay home, everyone, but you can go and do certain activities, but keep social distancing, right? I don't think we're going back to the way it was.
Right.
And that's just no, there's no reason to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the one part of we'll probably phase back into the new normal from the stay at home, right? And they're already talking about it. Governor Cuomo, and I watch his press conferences as often as I can, talks about going in phases. Testing is going to be a significant part of this, while the medical field is working on a vaccine. How do you treat this? So I think in terms of day-to-day life, I think online is going to, people are going to get better at it. Education is going to get better at it. I think, you know, with regard to these mass gatherings, I'm not sure I'm particularly interested.
Right.
Right? Like I never was in love with these grand gatherings to begin with.
Right.
But even so, I think people are going to be a little bit more thoughtful about what they choose to do in terms of activity. So I don't, that's just my thinking going forward based on a little bit of information that I have. I think this thing about online is going to be a great divide if we don't handle it well and equip communities well. People saw this happening a long time ago. Not in addition to the pandemic, they saw the use of the internet as a tool. While I think there's a book I suggest you read, and anyone else watching this video, called The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this nomadic lifestyle because your business is online and you reach the world and you travel the world. And it's because you're not locked into an office. And there's a whole movement behind it of people who have digitized their lives and automated their lives. And so I think that book came out in 2007,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of people, creators who have come up with it. So I think the best thing we can do right now is make sure that our kids learn how to think,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's almost like a lost art. And when I say that, yes, in school you learn how to memorize and you can regurgitate, but there are very few schools that I've been to that I'm aware where people have to think in class.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are not a thinker in the 21st century global village, you will go by the wayside. See, your partner's thinking to say, hey, elderberry, we know it has certain medicinal value. For her to say, even though she's a professor,
Mm-hmm.
I see this as an option.
Mm-hmm.
That requires thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not thinking is, okay, well, what will the university tell me what to do next?
Right.
Right? Yeah, well, good luck with that.
Right.
But the thinker says, well, there's a situation. I know this. People I know that this thing adds value.
Mm-hmm.
Then let's get a price point that's going to meet their need.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the where it's going. And those who can't think are going to be at a huge disadvantage. And I think that has implications for the kind of life that they can lead.
Right. I think, you know, when you were saying that, this is going to be biased, but I believe that growing up in Brooklyn in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s has given us this thing where we're always thinking about how to move around something. Like it, you know, like, I mean, as basic as being a teenager, going to a club and wanting to skip the line and trying to figure out, well, how can I get in without getting on the line? Maybe I know somebody in there. Maybe I could say something to the, maybe I know the dude, that's my guy, but this idea, this is, and it's not germane to Brooklyn, but this idea that we had coming up that we have to survive, we have to thrive because that's who we are. We're not going to be placed in this box and allow this box to define us. Brooklyn Dudes has always been about that since we came up. And so that kind of train of thought is what now, when it's time to survive, you realize what's in your toolbox. And that having that in your toolbox is a big thing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we've lost so many people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the beauty in that, in some ways, is that those who made it out are better equipped to navigate. But a lot of people didn't make it through that transition. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that we're responsible to do good work on behalf of ourselves and our family. But for those who have poured into us just a little bit, but didn't make it through the trials of being and living in an underserved community, mm-hmm. right? But there are other people who did not have to go through that, who don't know how to think and don't know how to pivot. So it's a yin and a yang. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you make an excellent point in terms of what people see. See, if you see opportunity, that's great, because you always had to see opportunity. Right. You said getting into the club, like, that same thing is how you get into this huge fundraiser at $50,000 a plate, right? And you don't have 50,000. Well, you can do a whole lot of things. One of the things you can do, look at D Nice, like he's a DJ at the White House, right? Right. So there are different ways you say, well, what skill or activity or value can I bring that will get me access? Mm-hmm. And that's just seeing things differently and really putting in time to think things through. Great point.
Man, this has been great. Excuse me. I thank you for your time. I know, and again, in these days and times, like we're going from one conference to another, we're on the phone, like work and business is done differently. And, some of us are having better time adjusting to it than others. How's the rest of your day look? Like, how does a day look for you now?
So there'll be meetings, there'll be emails. We're putting something in my professional life. We're putting together a MBK Village meeting online on April 23rd, which would have been the day we had the symposium, right, where we bring about 1,000 people together in Albany. Right. But we just have to focus on our fellows right now, because we've poured a lot into them in terms of resources and asking them to get into doing community service. And we're going to do a checkup on them and virtually. So I'm doing a lot of planning for that. Later on today, so with schools being shut down, many of the opportunity grants that come out of my office, right, we have to now give them guidance and direction and be flexible on how could they use these grants differently to meet the needs. Because while before they were going into bricks and mortar buildings, now it has shifted. And so we have to be creative. So that's what my day looks like. At some point, I'll check on my daughter, make sure that she's okay. She is, but she's doing her learning from home. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to make sure that that's going as well as it can be, and that it's meeting her needs. So that's what it looks like. Then at some point, I'll go outside and run 3-4 miles.
Good. I'm glad to hear that you keeping that going. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Love you.
All right. Be well.
You know what I'm saying? Glad to see you doing well. Keep it moving. And we'll talk,
All right. Be well and be safe. And love to your pops. I'm sure he appreciated the haircut.
Absolutely.
And certainly your moms as well. The whole thing. All right.
Thank you. Take care, brother.
Peace.
Peace.